The planet Relos 4, a neutral territory, was chosen as the military training center of the Galactic Alliance. Unlike the modernized core planets of the Empire, Relos 4 retained an air of wilderness with sparse forests, a star-filled sky, and a tranquil atmosphere that allowed one to hear their heartbeat clearly. In a small corner of the military base, a campfire burned brightly, as if daring the encroaching night. The flames danced on the polished armor of young soldiers rookies gathered from across the galaxy. These soldiers hailed from diverse species, selected for their exceptional intelligence and physical prowess. They were being trained for a special mission, the invasion of Earth. According to the Alliance's classification, Earth was a low-level planet. Yet, its natural resources from rare minerals to pristine water made it a tempting target. Most recruits dismissed the mission as a trivial task. Their previous lectures painted humanity as a barbaric, primitive, and technologically inferior species. Tonight, the campfire's ambience shifted when veteran Orion arrived. He was a living legend in the Alliance's military, not for glorious victories but as one of the few survivors of the First Earth campaign, a humiliating disaster. Standing silently outside the circle for a moment, Orion let his gaze pass over each young soldier. His eyes, deep and quiet, seemed to hold a universe of memories and pain. A young officer rose, breaking the silence. "Commander Orion, it is an honor to hear from you. Please share your best strategies for defeating the humans." His voice echoed with pride, as though asserting that Earth was no match for them. Orion smirked. It wasn't a mocking smile but one carrying the weariness of experience. He sat by the fire without a word, allowing the flames to highlight his aged, deeply lined face. When he finally spoke, his raspy voice seemed to freeze the air around them. "Defeat the humans, you say? You think you're preparing to conquer a weak, insignificant planet? That's what we thought, until reality hit us." Orion's first words immediately altered the atmosphere. A sense of unease crept into the minds of the young recruits. They glanced at one another, their eyes reflecting confusion. Why would a legend like Orion contradict the narrative of an easy victory they had been told? Orion began to recount. He didn't talk about strategies or weapons. Instead, he described his first impressions of Earth. "You've never seen a planet like it," he said, his gaze distant. "Earth is not just a planet. It's a living entity. Everything there, from the vegetation to the animals, even the climate, is a silent but deadly adversary. We arrived with advanced technology, mighty armies, and blind confidence. But within a week, we realized we had entered a natural killing machine." He paused, letting his words sink into the minds of his listeners. A young soldier of the Dalian species, with crystalline blue eyes, hesitantly asked, "But, Commander, humans are so primitive. How could they possibly stand against the Alliance's technology?" Orion turned to him, his sharp gaze cutting like a blade. "They don't just fight with technology. They fight with something you can't comprehend, an indomitable will to survive. Humanity, more than any other species in the galaxy, has mastered adaptation. They don't crumble under adversity. On the contrary, adversity is what forges them." He recounted tales of Earth warriors who lacked energy shields or plasma weapons but turned the terrain, climate, and even their own bodies into weapons. He spoke of an ambush his unit had faced in a tropical jungle. "We were attacked by what you would call savages. Yet those savages wiped out half my forces with traps and poison-tipped arrows. We, clad in supposedly impenetrable armor, fell to nature itself, which they knew better than anyone." Every word he spoke cut deep into the pride of the young soldiers. Some began to feel frustration, but none dared interrupt. They understood that Orion wasn't trying to frighten them but was sharing the harsh truth. Orion concluded with a statement that silenced them all: "If you think humans are weak, you don't understand war. Weakness isn't defined by a lack of advanced weapons. Weakness is not understanding your enemy." As Orion left the campfire circle, a somber mood settled over the soldiers. They began to question whether they were truly prepared for the campaign. Was Earth as simple a target as they had been led to believe? Orion sat within the circle of firelight, his voice heavy and haunting as he began recounting the story of Earth not as a fragile target, but as a living, harsh, and fearsome entity. He emphasized that these young recruits were unprepared to face a planet like this. Earth is not an ordinary battlefield, Orion said, his eyes gleaming like the fire before him. It's a natural killing machine. Not just its people, but the very planet itself is our enemy. Orion recounted his first landing in the Amazon rainforest, where the campaign began. They were equipped with state-of-the-art energy armor, advanced plasma weapons, and a team of support robots programmed to neutralize all threats. But as soon as they entered the jungle, they realized technology couldn't protect them from enemies they had never imagined. They encountered a type of vine that released toxic gas when severed. Within minutes, 3 soldiers collapsed, their faces turning purple as they gasped for air. The medical equipment on the ship failed to analyze the unfamiliar toxin, leaving them helpless as they watched their comrades die. Orion described a horrifying night when his army was attacked by a species of tiny mosquitoes. These weren't just bloodsuckers, they carried toxins potent enough to paralyze the nervous system. Within hours, dozens of soldiers fell, their bodies convulsing before succumbing. We had insect nets and antidotes, but nothing could save them. We thought we were prepared for everything, but nature always has a way to strike back, Orion said, his voice choking. Even the weather became an enemy. One day, Orion's army was caught in an unexpected acid rainstorm. Their weather sensors had detected nothing unusual. When the first drops fell, they corroded the soldiers' outer armor and advanced equipment within minutes. We couldn't escape the rain. The suits were destroyed so quickly that soldiers had to abandon them and face the toxic climate unprotected. When it finally stopped, we realized we had lost over a quarter of our forces in mere hours, not to combat, but to the planet itself, Orion sighed. Orion couldn't hide his admiration as he spoke of humanity's survival skills. While his advanced army struggled to withstand nature, the local humans they encountered thrived. We came across a group of farmers near the conflict zone, he said. They had no armor, no advanced weapons. Yet they survived. They turned this harsh environment into their ally. They knew which plants were poisonous, which insects to avoid, and how to disappear from our sight. Orion told the story of an elderly woman leading a small group. She commanded her family to dig shelters in an area the Alliance forces considered uninhabitable. She looked at us without fear. While we scrambled to survive, she calmly continued planting seeds and tending her fields as if nothing had happened. Orion paused to look at the young soldiers, most of whom had lost their initial arrogance. You think your weapons and technology are invincible. But Earth is not a planet you can conquer with brute force. He continued his analysis. Earth's environment, Earth is not just the home of humans, the planet itself has shaped them into survival masters. Its flora, fauna, climate, and terrain are tools humans use to repel any invaders. Survival instinct, Orion stressed that humanity's will to survive is immeasurable. They do not fight for glory or resources, they fight for the survival of their species. This makes them one of the most dangerous enemies in the galaxy. You're not fighting against weak humans, Orion said, his voice grave. You're facing an entire living planet. And if you continue to underestimate them, I promise Earth will leave none of you alive to tell the tale. Orion's story ended, but the silence of the night was no longer comforting. It was heavy, like a storm about to break. For the first time, the young soldiers doubted the campaign they had once assumed would be an easy victory. Orion took a deep breath before starting his tale, as if the memory of the encounter itself was suffocating. That was the first time I understood that Earth was not just harsh because of its environment. It was the warriors of this planet who were the greatest challenge. Orion recounted the campaign in the Himalayan mountains, where his army launched a strategic march to break the humans' defense lines. They thought the harsh terrain of the snowy mountains would weaken Earth's forces. But they hadn't realized that this terrain would become humanity's strongest ally. We were lured into a narrow gorge, Orion said, his hand tracing shapes in the air as if illustrating the scene. Thermal sensors showed no signs of enemies. We believed we were entering a safe zone, but that was a fatal mistake. As the alien forces ventured deeper into the gorge, loud explosions erupted. A series of detonations triggered avalanches from above, sending tons of snow crashing down, burying dozens of soldiers in seconds. Support robots, programmed for dry and stable environments, were immobilized under the thick layers of ice and snow. It wasn't nature that caused the avalanche. It was them, Orion emphasized. Humans had calculated our every move and turned the harsh terrain into a perfect trap. As the surviving alien forces struggled to regroup amidst the chaos, the real attack began. Only 20 Earth warriors appeared, but their precision and audacity left a lasting impression on Orion. The Earth warriors carried only rifles and a few homemade grenades. Yet they exploited the terrain to move swiftly and strike from all directions. Every shot and every grenade was precisely aimed at the aliens' weak points. Orion recalled seeing one of his soldiers struck in the control unit of their armor, causing the entire power system to collapse. They didn't need overwhelming firepower. They only needed to target our vulnerabilities. Orion realized that these Earth warriors felt no fear, even when faced with a vastly larger and better equipped army. I could see the determination in their eyes. They weren't fighting for themselves. They were fighting for something greater, family, homeland, or perhaps just the belief that they could not afford to fail. Among the Earth warriors, Orion could never forget a young soldier, barely 20 years old. The soldier was gravely wounded, his camouflage jacket soaked in blood. But instead of retreating, he charged directly at Orion's forces with a makeshift bomb in hand. We saw him, but couldn't react in time. He sprinted with unimaginable speed, dodging bullets and combat robots, and detonated the bomb just meters away from us, Orion recounted, his voice heavy. The explosion collapsed part of the gorge, halting Orion's entire flank. The young warrior's sacrifice not only inflicted heavy losses on Orion's army but also left a profound impact on his mind. That was the moment I understood we could not defeat them. Not because of technology or numbers, but because they were willing to sacrifice everything to protect what they held dear. Orion didn't just narrate the events, he delved into why humans were such dangerous enemies. Earth's warriors don't fight for glory or power. They fight for something we cannot comprehend: love for family, faith in their comrades, and an unbreakable will. That is something any invader must fear. Orion admired how humans used everything at their disposal to turn weaknesses into strengths. They didn't need advanced technology or overwhelming numbers. They only needed to know how to leverage what they had. They turned terrain, weather, and even their own lives into weapons, he said. The battle in the snowy mountains marked a turning point in Orion's perception of Earth and its defenders. No longer did they see the planet as an easy conquest. They began to understand that this was a war unlike any they had fought before. We returned to our base, carrying losses that could never be replaced. But what haunted me most wasn't the defeat, it was the eyes of that young soldier before he detonated the bomb. There was no fear in his eyes, only resolve. And that was what scared me the most, Orion concluded, his voice laden with gravity. After the story, the campfire circle fell silent. The young soldiers, who had thought themselves invincible, were now forced to confront the reality that their enemy was unlike any they had faced before. "Are you ready?" Orion asked, his gaze sweeping across them. But no one answered, for they all knew that this question could not be answered lightly. Orion began his tale with a low voice, as if reliving a memory that was both painful and beautiful. "At that moment, I thought I would die," he admitted. "But fate arranged a meeting that changed my life forever." The battle in the Amazon rainforest was more brutal than anything Orion had ever known. His alien army, confident in its advanced technology, was quickly overwhelmed by the natural environment and the guerrilla tactics of humans. In one tense skirmish, Orion was gravely injured. "A bullet from one of their primitive rifles pierced through my armor," he said, lightly touching his chest where the scar still remained. Orion's forces were forced to retreat, but due to the severity of his condition, they abandoned their commander in the dense wilderness. Injured, without food or water, Orion wandered through the forest, facing threats from venomous insects, wild predators, and the harsh environment. "I thought death was inevitable. And I was ready to accept it." As Orion collapsed under the shade of an ancient tree, a shadow appeared. It was a human woman, petite in stature yet exuding a determined aura. She wore simple clothes, her face smudged with mud, but what shocked Orion the most was her calm demeanor upon seeing him, a being from another world. The woman showed no fear. Instead, she examined Orion's wounds and began gathering natural remedies. She used tree bark as bandages, sap to stop the bleeding, and some leaves I couldn't identify to ease the pain, Orion recounted. "I couldn't fathom how an ordinary human could know so much." Though they didn't speak the same language, her actions needed no explanation. She dragged him to a nearby cave, providing shelter from predators and the rain, and continued tending to him for days. Orion remembered his mixed feelings as he watched her work, gratitude and a bruised sense of pride. I, a high-ranking commander of the Orion Empire, had to rely on the kindness of an Earth civilian. When Orion regained enough strength to speak, he asked the woman why she had saved him. "I am your enemy. I led the forces that came here to destroy your planet. Why would you risk saving me?" The woman responded with a soft smile and a sentence Orion would never forget: "War cannot destroy kindness." Those simple words left a deep impression on him. To her, he wasn't an invader or an alien. He was simply a life in need of saving. Orion stayed with the woman for 2 weeks, during which she taught him to use nature's resources to survive. In that time, he not only regained his strength but also gained a deeper understanding of humanity, something he had never considered before. Through gestures and simple words, Orion learned that the woman had lost her family in the war. Her son had died defending a village from his army. Yet instead of harboring hatred, she chose to preserve her compassion and help anyone in need, friend or foe. "She never blamed me, even though I was part of the force that took away everything she loved," Orion said, his voice filled with emotion. "I couldn't comprehend such generosity, but I felt it deeply." This experience forced Orion to confront a profound inner conflict. As a soldier and commander, he was trained to feel neither pity nor doubt. But the woman's actions made him question the true nature of the war. "We came here to conquer and destroy. But do beings capable of such love and forgiveness deserve annihilation?" Orion began to see the absurdity of eradicating a species not only resilient but also rich in compassion. The woman's existence was a testament to humanity's strength and their capacity to rise above hatred and pain. When Orion was strong enough to leave, the woman guided him to the edge of the forest, where he could contact his army. Before he departed, she left him with one final message. "Remember, not all humans only know how to fight. We also know how to live and love." Orion looked back at her one last time before walking away in silence. In his heart, a strange new emotion had begun to grow: respect, gratitude, and a deep sense of guilt. This experience not only saved Orion's life but also changed his perspective on the war. From then on, he reminded his soldiers that their enemies were not just strong warriors but also individuals capable of love, forgiveness, and sacrifice. Orion admitted, "It was their kindness that scared me the most because it was something we could never truly conquer." The chapter closes with a profound lesson, not just for Orion but for all those embroiled in the conflict. In the darkness of war, kindness remains an unquenchable light. Late at night, the flickering firelight illuminated Orion's resolute face. He sat there, contemplative, his deep-set eyes gazing into the flames as if piercing through time to revisit distant memories. Young soldiers gathered around him, silent, hanging onto every word he spoke as if his voice carried the weight of the universe. Orion took a deep breath before speaking. "Never underestimate humans," he began, his voice deep and commanding. "They are not just a species, they are the embodiment of willpower, of an unyielding strength." The young soldiers sat in silence. Their gazes held a mixture of curiosity and unease. Many had heard of humanity's resilience, but Orion's story offered a perspective that transcended tales of a formidable enemy. It was a mirror reflecting their own vulnerabilities. Orion continued, his tone slower, more profound. He emphasized that human willpower was not merely external strength. It was forged over millennia of evolution, tempered by countless trials of survival. "Humans do not fight because they want to," Orion explained. "They fight because they must, for what they love, for what they cannot afford to lose. The most dangerous enemy," he added, "is not the one with the most advanced technology, but the one who refuses to surrender, even when all seems lost." Orion recounted another battle, one where his forces had been confident in their superiority of technology and numbers. But humanity did not falter. "They did not only fight us with weapons," he said, "but with their intellect, persistence, and determination. They turned even the environment into a weapon, transforming their disadvantages into strengths." That battle had been a bitter lesson for Orion. He realized that no amount of soldiers or weaponry could secure victory without true resolve. "We lost sight of our purpose," he admitted, "while humans always knew why they fought." As the story progressed, the young soldiers began to feel conflicted. They had been trained to believe in their superiority, that victory was inevitable. Yet Orion's tale planted seeds of doubt. If humanity was so formidable, could they truly win? And was this war truly worth waging? One soldier, unable to hold back, asked, "Commander, if humans are so admirable, why must we destroy them?" Orion's gaze pierced through the young soldier's resolve. "War is not always rational," he replied. "But that is precisely why we must understand our enemy. And I want you to understand this: if you underestimate humans, you won't just lose the battle, you'll face an even greater defeat." Orion stood, the firelight casting a towering yet somber silhouette. He looked at each soldier in turn and said, "You will face them in the future. You will witness their strength, both physical and spiritual. Remember this: technology and numbers are not everything. What truly matters is knowing why you fight. Without a worthy cause, your will shall crumble before theirs." His words were not merely a warning, they were a profound lesson. Orion was not just speaking about humanity. He was speaking about all species, including his own army. True strength does not come from external forces but from the belief and will within. Orion left the circle, leaving behind a heavy silence. None of the young soldiers spoke, but within each of them, a storm of emotions raged. Some felt fear at the thought of facing humanity. Others began to admire the enemy's strength and questioned whether this war was truly just. Orion's story was not just a lesson in warfare. It was a reminder that true strength lies not in weapons or technology but in willpower and purpose. And in the darkness of the universe, humanity with all its flaws and weaknesses shone like an undying torch. The chapter ends with the young soldiers sitting around a campfire, their eyes reflecting the flames of contemplation and worry. The coming war is not just a confrontation between species, but also a battle of wills and beliefs. And regardless of who wins or loses, Orion knows that the lessons he has left will resonate with them forever.